So picture this. You have a teenager who can diagnose and completely rebuild a tractor engine entirely by ear.
Oh, wow, yeah. That's a serious skill.
Right. Or maybe you have a student who can read these really subtle shifts in the wind to predict a storm. Or they manage a household of younger siblings and they totally know how to navigate complex neighborhood dynamics.
Basically, they have immense practical intelligence.
Exactly. They walk into a classroom carrying years, sometimes even generations, of this deep, lived experience.
Right.
But then, the second that school bell rings, we treat them like a blank slate.
Yeah, we really do.
We just pretend that real learning only magically begins the moment the teacher opens a textbook.
I mean, it's a profound and, frankly, very limiting contradiction in how we view intelligence. Because we just strip away their context, we treat their minds as these empty vessels waiting to be filled, rather than, these rich, complex networks of existing knowledge.
Which is exactly why we're doing this deep dive today. Because there is this groundbreaking educational framework out of Alaska, specifically Alaska Cultural Standard B2, that completely flips this dynamic on its head.
It does. It operates on a very simple but radical premise, and that is what you already know isn't a distraction from academics. It is the absolute foundation of it.
And so for you listening, I want to frame our core question today. Think about how you learn best. Do you start from scratch? Or do you attach new information to something you already understand?
It's always the latter, right? We have to build on what's there.
Always. And to get into this, we really have to completely redefine what cultural knowledge actually means in a classroom setting. Because I think the immediate image that pops into a lot of people's heads is, well, classroom decoration.
Oh, for sure, like a Heritage Month celebration or bringing in a traditional dish.
Right, looking at traditional clothing, things like that. And those things definitely have their place. But treating culture as just food and festivals, it completely misses the intellectual rigor. We are talking about actual intellectual infrastructure here.
Yes. It dictates what we notice in the world, the patterns we recognize, and how we solve complex problems. We have to move way past those superficial definitions.
After that.
Because indigenous knowledge, or traditional ecological knowledge, it encompasses highly sophisticated physics, biology, meteorology, engineering. I mean, this is a living, evolving system of empirical science.
And it's developed through, thousands of years of continuous observation, right? And practice and storytelling and apprenticeship.
Exactly. Systematic experimentation.
So let's get into the mechanics of this, because the Alaska-based examples we found in the sources are just incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, so imagine standing on the open tundra in the Kuskokwim River region.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, and it's the pitch black of an Alaskan winter. Everything is flat, everything is white. There are no trees, no mountains, no obvious landmarks at all, just blowing snow and sky. So, how do you find your way home?
You definitely don't just guess.
No, you don't. Yupik hunters actually navigate this using applied spatial geometry. They measure the angle of the gamma star above the horizon using this highly precise system of handspans.
Right, and they use specific 3 to 4 finger rotations to calibrate latitude and direction. It's brilliant.
It really is.
I mean, that is a literal life or death mathematical model of the night sky. And it extends to physics and fluid dynamics, too.
Oh, like with the river currents?
Yeah. Local fishers placing their nets in river currents, they aren't just tossing them in randomly and hoping for the best. They are reading specific eddies, calculating water flow, velocity, and resistance.
Because they have to optimize their catch without destroying their gear in the process.
Exactly. Or take predicting the weather. They observe specific cloud formations alongside the behavioral changes of the willow grouse.
And we have to emphasize, that isn't folklore.
No, not at all. It is a synthesized meteorological data set. Atmospheric pressure changes are being cross-referenced with animal behavior.
Which brings up the animal behavior aspect, the applied ecology. This is where it gets really vivid for me, because there's this account from an Inupiaq elder detailing a traditional caribou hunting method.
Oh, this is a fascinating example.
Right, so the instinct for a novice might be to just chase the herd, but that burns precious calories and it just spooks the animals. Instead, a hunter would stand out openly on the tundra and mimic the movements of a giant bird flapping its wings.
Which sounds completely counterintuitive until you understand the biology of the caribou. Because caribou are prey animals, so they are constantly scanning the horizon for wolves or bears, but they also possess this immense curiosity about non-predator anomalies.
Ah, so a giant bird is strange, but it isn't a wolf.
Exactly. It doesn't immediately trigger that predator evasion response. So the lead bull's biological instinct is to investigate, to assess the anomaly. And this curiosity forces them into a closing spiral, circling closer and closer, delivering themselves right to the hunters.
So they are actively exploiting a biological instinct.
I love that. And, treating this knowledge as just culture in the decorative sense, it's like assuming tech skills only means knowing how to code in Python, while just totally ignoring that kid who can diagnose and rebuild a tractor engine entirely by ear.
That is spot on.
Right, because one is validated by a traditional school system, and the other is actual applied engineering that just, well, doesn't happen to look like a standard textbook.
That analogy hits the absolute core of the issue. If we understand that this highly localized practical knowledge is essentially applied engineering and science, the next logical step is figuring out how to use it in a classroom.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that.
Well, this local knowledge is the absolute perfect launchpad for investigating global scientific and academic questions. Okay, so I'm going to push back just a little bit here. Let's say a kid intuitively understands caribou behavior or river currents. That is brilliant for survival. But if I'm a teacher with a state-mandated science curriculum, how do I actually map that onto, global biology or geology?
It's a great question. You use the local phenomenon as a high-resolution component of a global system.
Okay, give me an example.
Let's look at the Shikan-based stone tidal weir.
Oh, the Tlingit engineering marvel on the west side of Prince of Wales Islands.
Exactly. And it wasn't just found sitting on a beach. It was discovered 170 feet underwater using sonar and underwater robotics. And it's dated to approximately 11,110 years ago.
Which makes it the oldest confirmed fish trap in North America, right?
Yep.
So in a standard classroom, a student might just, memorize that date for a history test and move on.
Yeah.
But using this framework, that ancestral weir becomes a tool to study deep time and massive Earth systems.
Precisely. Because first of all, to understand why a stone wall built for catching fish is currently sitting 170 feet underwater, students actually have to study global deglaciation and regional tectonic uplift.
Oh, that makes total sense. They can't understand the artifact without understanding the geology.
Right. And they also analyze the specific engineering of the weir itself. It features this distinct funnel shape.
And that funnel isn't just a barricade, is it?
No, it operates as a selective filter. It's calibrated so that the gaps allow younger, smaller, juvenile fish to swim right through to spawn upstream while trapping only the massive adults.
That is mind-blowing. So students are analyzing an 11,000-year-old mechanism for sustainable population dynamics. They're learning advanced biology and geology through a local cultural artifact.
Yes, and we see this direct line to modern climate science, too. In the community of Point Lay, students observed a very localized, everyday phenomenon, the physical settling and shifting of their own house foundations.
Oh, like doors suddenly not closing right or floors tilting?
Exactly. And if you stop there, it's just a local infrastructure annoyance. But they use this observation to study the thermal degradation of ice-rich permafrost. They actually map the active layer soil temperatures right in their own backyards.
And then they scale it up, right?
Yes. They take that hyperlocal data and scale it upward, plugging it into circumpolar Arctic monitoring networks to understand global carbon cycle models.
I mean, they participating in science, not just reading about it. They see firsthand that the physical expressions they witness every single day are directly connected to global Earth systems.
It's powerful stuff.
It is, but I want to be real for a second because this brings up another challenge. If you take a grandfather's oral history about, say, historical ice thickness, and you put it next to a massive multi-terabyte data set from a NASA climate satellite, I feel like kids, and frankly a lot of adults, are going to assume the NASA data is the quote-unquote real science.
Oh, absolutely. That is a very common assumption.
So how do teachers stop one from completely overshadowing the other without making them seem like they're in competition?
That is the essential challenge of this pedagogy. And the solution is a concept often referred to as two-eyed seeing.
Two-eyed seeing. I like the sound of that.
The goal is never to rank one knowledge system above another. You have to understand that Western academic science and indigenous knowledge, they operate differently. They ask different questions, but they are deeply complementary.
Okay, let's break that down for the listener. How do they actually differ in practice?
Well, Western science is often short-term, it's localized to a very specific study area, and it's quantitative and reductionist.
And by reductionist, you mean?
I mean, it seeks to understand a system by isolating specific variables, like taking a water sample and isolating just the pH level in a beaker. It fundamentally disconnects the observer from the observed.
Got it. And indigenous knowledge.
Indigenous knowledge is long-term, intergenerational, holistic, and relational. It doesn't separate the observer from the environment. It assumes interconnectedness. So it looks at how the fish behavior changes in that water over 50 years, not just the pH today.
Right. But both systems still require evidence, comparison, revision, and a lot of intellectual humility.
Absolutely.
So if a teacher's doing this right, they aren't just dropping a traditional story into a science lesson as a fun little hook to keep kids awake.
No, no, no. Doing that is what educators call beads and feathers tokenism.
Beads and feathers tokenism. Okay.
Yeah, it's like reading a traditional story about a raven just to suddenly pivot to a standard lesson on food chains without actually analyzing the ecological data that is encoded within that original story. We cannot flatten these systems or falsely claim they are identical. They do different jobs.
The Yukon River salmon runs are a perfect illustration of this from the sources.
Oh, yeah. Tell them about that.
Right. So if you only rely on short-term Western scientific studies, say like a 3-year academic grant, you might establish a baseline that completely misses subtle, long-term ecological anomalies, because 3 years just isn't enough time. But local harvesters, they have been observing the specific arrival times, the fat content, and the physical health of salmon runs for decades. They can identify these really subtle changes like the occurrence of white nose or blue-back Chinook salmon runs.
And that is vital longitudinal data on environmental stress and adaptation that a standard 3-year study would just never catch.
Right.
We see this epistemological bridging in real time with some of these new projects.
Wait, epistemological bridging, you just mean taking two completely different ways of knowing what is true and layering them over each other to get a better picture?
Precisely. Sorry, a bit of academic jargon there, but yes. We see that bridging in real-world co-management projects,
Great.
like the Ikagvik Sikukun project.
Oh, with the bearded seals.
Yes, the Ugruk. You have indigenous hunters and Western scientists co-managing research on the bearded seal.
So how does that dynamic work? Who does what?
Well, the hunters contribute generational observations of sea ice dynamics, prevailing winds, and seal resting behaviors. And then the scientists provide technical tools like flying aerial drones for data interpretation.
But they work together on the execution, right?
Exactly. The hunters actually tell the scientists where to fly the drones, and then the drones provide a new vantage point for the hunters' observations. Together, they achieve this holistic understanding of a rapidly changing environment that neither could possibly achieve alone.
It's basically like combining a macro lens and a wide-angle lens on a camera.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like you need the wide-angle satellite data to see the whole coast and the broad temperature trends. But you absolutely need the macro lens of intergenerational observation to know exactly when the fish arrive, how they behave, and what that actually means for the people living there.
Right. You cannot capture reality with just one lens.
No, you can't.
And when students practice moving between those lenses, switching from the quantitative data of Western science to the relational, contextual data of traditional oral histories, they develop a much more resilient and rigorous understanding of the world.
I completely agree. But this brings up a really crucial boundary issue that we need to talk about.
Okay, yeah.
If we are completely changing the classroom environment to bring all this personal, local, and family knowledge into the center of the curriculum, aren't we crossing a line?
How do you mean?
Well, what if a student's family history is tied to trauma? Or what if a student just doesn't want to share? How do we protect them?
Yes, it is a critical ethical boundary. When you start dealing with personal identity and family history, you enter very sensitive territory. The B2 framework lays out strict ethical boundaries to prevent what we call cultural extraction.
Cultural extraction.
Yes, that's when an institution takes indigenous knowledge out of its moral and relational context just to serve a Western academic goal, effectively turning students into data points.
So what does preventing that extraction actually look like in a day-to-day classroom?
First and foremost, students must never be forced to disclose private family information, ever. They cannot be mandated to share sensitive harvesting locations, like, say, a family-specific berry patch or a secluded fishing camp.
Right, because that's their livelihood.
Exactly. And they must never be put on the spot to act as the sole spokesperson for their entire cultural group.
Especially because Alaska is massively diverse. You can't just generalize across the state.
It is incredibly diverse. You have the Inupiaq in the north, the Yupik in the southwest, the Athabascan in the interior, the Twinet and Haida in the southeast, among many others.
So one size definitely does not fit all.
Not at all. A teacher cannot take a curriculum designed around the temperate rainforests and salmon clans of Southeast Alaska and just drop it into a classroom in the boreal forests of interior Alaska. It requires deep, local translation and ongoing consultation with local tribal councils and elders.
Okay, so if a teacher's trying to meet this cultural standard, right, they want to validate the student's background, but they absolutely must protect student privacy, what do they actually do?
Well, the concept of universal design offers a really elegant solution here.
Universal design, I usually hear that in relation to architecture.
Right. Let's define it in that context first. In architecture, universal design is putting a ramp on a building. It's meant for wheelchairs, but parents with strollers and delivery workers use it too. You build accessibility in from the start so nobody has to ask for a special accommodation.
That makes total sense. So how does that translate to education?
In education, it means designing an assignment, so nobody has to ask for a special exception if a topic is too personal or painful.
Okay, I have a good example of this from the research.
Hmm.
Let's say the academic goal is to teach genealogy and historical adaptation.
A classic lesson.
Right. But for some students, tracing a human family tree might involve trauma or colonial disruption or complicated foster dynamics. A forced genealogy project can be deeply, deeply distressing.
It happens all the time.
So universal design means providing parallel options that demonstrate the exact same academic skills. Instead of tracing a human family tree, a student could choose to trace the evolutionary phylogeny of a local Pacific salmon species. They map how it adapted to regional river systems over thousands of years.
That is a perfect example. Or let's say the class is studying the engineering of traditional tools. Instead of asking a student to bring in a fragile or sacred family heirloom, which puts a lot of pressure on them, the teacher can have the class analyze the material engineering and thermodynamic insulation efficiency of caribou fur parkas in general.
Oh, I love that. It keeps the focus on the rigorous science and the cultural brilliance, but it completely removes the pressure of personal disclosure.
Exactly.
But it still makes me wonder, how does a teacher actually encourage students to bring their background to school without accidentally demanding it? Because we want that intellectual infrastructure to be utilized, we just can't mandate its exposure.
It comes down to creating voluntary, open-ended opportunities for connection. So instead of asking a direct, intrusive question like, how does your specific family preserve fish? A teacher asks a broader systemic question.
Loquat.
Like, what are some patterns we notice in the local environment when the seasons change?
Ah, I see.
This allows the student to volunteer their knowledge on their own terms, whether that's about fish preservation, changing frost lines, or migrating birds. It emphasizes respect, reciprocity, and community sovereignty over that knowledge.
That is such an important distinction. And, when we step back and look at the big picture we painted today, it all circles back to that kid in the classroom we started with.
It really does.
We started with the idea that students shouldn't have to check their lived experience at the door.
Yeah.
And we've seen how, through the lens of Alaska Cultural Standard B2, that local knowledge, whether it's reading the stars, understanding the ethology of a caribou, or observing the active layer of permafrost, it is actual, rigorous intellectual infrastructure.
It is the blueprint for learning. It provides the context that makes abstract scientific concepts concrete and relevant.
Right.
By treating cultural knowledge not as classroom decoration, but as a valid empirical way of knowing, we allow students to investigate massive global systems without ever diminishing the integrity of their own heritage.
Which brings us to the central thesis of this entire deep dive, a standard that, frankly, should be applied everywhere. Education should not require students to leave their knowledge at the classroom door. It should help them examine it, strengthen it, connect it, and use it to understand more of the world.
That is the ultimate goal. To build a bicultural competence where students can navigate multiple knowledge systems, be it an engineering textbook or an elder's oral history, with equal capability, deep respect, and intellectual humility.
Such a powerful way to look at education. So for you listening, I want to leave you with a question to chew on as you go about your day. Think about your own life, your own family, your own neighborhood. What is a piece of invisible knowledge? Like a highly specific way of observing the weather, a unique way of solving a practical mechanical problem, or even a way of navigating social dynamics that you carry from your community. And how might that deeply ingrained invisible knowledge be the exact lens you need to understand something completely new today?